At 74, I woke up from surgery to learn that my own daughter had sold my house out from under me while I was still under the anesthesia. My name's Carol. I spent 40 years as a nurse in Cincinnati, 40 years holding other people's hands. I raised my daughter in a little house on Bellhaven Court, and my husband died in the front bedroom of it. That house was the last thing I had left of my whole life. 2 years back, after a bad illness, my daughter asked me to sign a power of attorney. Just in case, she said. So I signed it. That's what you do for your child. Then I broke my hip, and while I was in the hospital, she used it. She sold the house. She'd already picked out the nursing home. I came up out of the anesthesia, and the ground was just gone. I could have hired a lawyer and spent my last years at war with my only child. But I've watched too many families tear each other apart in hospital hallways to go that way. So I did the one thing she never saw coming. I still had my own savings in my own name. I took it, skipped the nursing home entirely, and flew to Iloilo in the Philippines. I picked Iloilo for one reason. A Filipina nurse I'd worked with years back, a woman named Elsa, used to show me pictures of home and say, "Carol, you'd love it. Over there they don't leave the old ones by themselves." It was the one word out of that whole conversation that had stuck in my head. So I flew 19 hours across the world with a cane and a carry-on and a hip that ached at 40,000 feet. 74 years old, headed for a place I had never once laid eyes on, because it was the only direction that wasn't backward. And I'll tell you the truth, that first night I sat on that bed and thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. The heat when I got there. I came out of that airport at 10 at night, and it just wrapped around me, thick, wet, like standing over a pot with the lid off. The air smelled like diesel. More people, more motorbikes, more noise than I'd ever seen. A language flying past me, and I couldn't catch one single word of it. I'd booked a little apartment for a month, sight unseen, off a website. The ride there scared me half to death. Traffic that had no rules I could see, past shacks and shiny malls and stray dogs and kids still up at midnight. And I sat in the back of that taxi, clutching my cane, and the whole size of what I'd done came down on me. I was an old white woman, alone, half-crippled, 10,000 miles from anybody who knew my name. And the people who were supposed to love me. I got into that little apartment, sat down on a strange bed under a ceiling fan that barely moved the hot air, and I cried the way I hadn't let myself cry in front of Denise. Carol, I thought, you foolish, foolish old woman. What have you done? In the morning, I'll find the airline office and go home. Except I had no home to go back to. And I guess that awful little fact is the only thing that kept me from running. Those first weeks were hard. So much harder than the brochures let on. The heat never let up. I was soaked through by breakfast, my ankles all swollen, that new hip aching. The power went out constantly, brownouts they call them, and I'd sit in the dark with the fan dead and the sweat running down my back, listening to a rooster somewhere that crowed at 3 in the morning, and again at 4, and again whenever it felt like it, all night. I got sick off something I ate. I got lost over and over. I couldn't get the phone to work, the little card you put in it, and it took me the better part of a week to sort out. And I stood in a grocery store one afternoon and just cried because I couldn't find one thing I recognized. And I started to wonder if I'd just traded one kind of being thrown away for another one in a hotter place. At least in the nursing home, there'd have been somebody in the next bed. And I miss things I didn't expect to miss. I miss the cold. Can you believe it? A real Ohio October, the leaves, a sweater. There was a maple in the front yard on Bellhaven Court, a big old sugar maple my husband and I planted the year Denise was born. And every fall it went the color of a struck match, and I would stand at the kitchen window with my coffee and just look at it. I used to complain about raking it. 40 years of raking under that tree. And now it belonged to whoever bought my house, some family I'll never meet, and their children will grow up thinking that maple is theirs, and I suppose it is now. That's the one that would get me at odd hours, not the rooms, not the furniture, the tree. And, God forgive me, I even missed Denise, or missed the daughter I thought I'd had. I was so angry at her. And I missed her too, both at once. I have to be honest about how low it got in there before it got better, because I don't want to skip to the warm part and cheat you. There was a stretch, 3 weeks in maybe, where I hardly went out at all. The newness had worn off, and what was left was just the ache of it. I'd wake before the rooster in that dark, hot room and lie there and grieve that house like it was a person who died. I'd walk myself through it, room by room, the way you press on a bruise to see if it still hurts. The front bedroom where Ray passed. The kitchen with the burn mark on the counter from Denise's science project. The closet where I'd penciled her height on the door frame every birthday until she got too old for it. All of it sold. I don't think I understood until those nights that a house isn't wood and pipe. It's the last place a bunch of people you loved were still in some way alive. And she sold it for the down payment on a facility she'd already toured. I'd lie there, and the anger and the missing would come at the same time, and I couldn't tell them apart. I broke down one of those nights and called Denise. It was morning, her time. I told myself I just wanted to hear her voice, but I think I wanted her to say she was sorry, and she didn't, and I didn't ask. And so we just sat there breathing at each other across the world. She asked, was I eating? She asked, careful, like she was stepping on ice, whether I'd thought any more about coming back and getting settled somewhere, which is her way of saying, the home is still available, Mother. I said the weather was nice. She said the kids were fine. Neither one of us said the one true thing. 14 seconds of nobody talking. I counted. Old nurse habit. I count things when I'm hurting. And then she said she had to. I set the phone down on that strange bed, and I felt more alone than I had the whole trip. Because it's one thing to be lonely among strangers, and another thing entirely to be lonely with your own child right there on the line. I didn't call her again for a good while after that, but slow, so slow I almost didn't catch it happening. The neighborhood started turning into people instead of just noise. First one was Aling Nita. Aling is a respect thing, like ma'am, for an older woman. She ran the Sari Sari store 2 doors down, which if you've never seen one is a tiny little shop, really just a window in the front of somebody's house, everything stacked up behind wire, shampoo in little single packets, cigarettes sold one at a time, Soft drinks in scratched-up glass bottles you've got to bring back. Aling Nita was maybe 60, tiny thing, a voice like gravel, and a laugh that came up out of her whole body. She spoke enough English to tease me, and she teased me something awful. "Ma'am Carol, why you so red? Ha! You drink water. Sit, sit." And she'd drag out a little plastic stool for me in the shade of her window, and I'd sit and drink a cold Coke out of a glass bottle, and I didn't have to say much, and neither did she. First time in weeks I felt like a person. And I have to tell you about the day I made a fool of myself in front of that woman. I still didn't understand the money. The coins all look alike to me, and I'd sort of hold my hand out full of change and let people take what they needed, which I know you're not supposed to do that. So one afternoon I bought a few things, some eggs, a bar of soap, a little sack of rice, and I stood there counting my change over and over in the sun because it felt short, and it was short, maybe 8 pesos, which is nothing. That's like 15 cents. But I was tired and hot, and I don't know what happened. I just started to cry. Right there at the window, over 15 cents. And I couldn't stop it. That was the awful part. I was standing in the street with my mouth all twisted up, trying to get hold of myself. The boy who'd shorted me, some kid helping out that day, he got this look of pure panic, like he'd broke something, and he kept saying, sorry, Po, holding coins out at me, which just made it worse somehow. And Aling Nita came around and saw me there with a wet face over a handful of coins. She didn't know what to do with me at first. She sort of laughed, this nervous little laugh, because what do you do? And then she took my hand and counted the coins out slow into my palm. This one is 10, this one is 5, like I was a child. And I stood there and let her, an old nurse who ran a whole hospital floor. Never in my life felt so useless. It took me a good while to settle. That kid, some relation of hers, he wouldn't hardly look at me for weeks after. I think I scared him. She still brings it up. "Ma'am Carol, you want I count for you, huh?" And there was the jeepney, too. I'd got it in my head the jeepney was cheaper than Boy's trike downtown. So one morning I climbed up into one, packed, everybody knee to knee. And when it came time to pay, I didn't know you're supposed to just pass your money up the row, hand to hand, to the driver. So the fellow next to me held his hand out, and I honestly thought he was trying to take my money off me. And I clutched my purse against my chest and said, "No, no," loud, sharper than I meant to. This poor man. He wasn't doing anything but trying to pass my fare up to the driver, like everybody does. And I just about accused him of stealing in front of the whole jeepney, and everybody went quiet. I could feel my face going hot. Somebody finally explained it. "You pass it up, ma'am." And I got so flustered, I dropped the coins, and they went all over the floor, and people had to pick them up for me. I got off 2 stops early to be out of there. Then there was Boy. That was his name, or his nickname anyhow. Half the men there seemed to go by Boy or Jun or Bong, a whole system I never cracked. Boy drove a tricycle, which is a motorbike with a sidecar bolted on, and that's your taxi for the short trips. And Boy figured out my hip before I ever said a word about it, because he saw me wince climbing into that sidecar, and after that, without making anything of it, he started pulling up closer to the doorways, and he'd hold the frame steady while I got out, and then he'd wait, engine off, really wait, till he saw me get inside safe before he drove off. Never. He said it to me once, though, when I tried to thank him and got a little weepy about it. He just shrugged and said, "Ma'am, old one, you cannot fall down who will scold me." Another time, by the sidecar, he said, "Ma'am, the neighbor, you watch him little bit, he watch you little bit, that is all." That's Boy. Oh, and Boy was crazy about basketball. Some team from up in Manila. He'd go on and on about them, and I never understood a word of it, but I'd nod along. That's just Boy. Now I've got to tell you about Nane Perla, because she's the one who dragged the old nurse out of me and put her back to work, though she'd be the first to say she did no such thing. Perla sold fish and vegetables at the wet market off La Paz. You know the kind of place. Concrete floors, running wet, the smell hitting you before you're through the door, ice melting over the day's catch, everybody hollering their prices. She had a stall about 3 feet wide, a scale that had lost its little glass window, and a smile with a gold tooth right in the front. Nane means mother, more or less. That's what everyone called her. She was 71, a year younger than me, which she never let go of once she found it out. Ha! Ma'am, I am the baby. And she'd been standing in that market since she was a girl of 9, first beside her own mother, then instead of her. 62 years selling fish in the same spot. But she was the one who taught me to buy. Press the eye of the fish, ma'am. Clear eye good, cloudy eye you leave it. And she'd never once let me overpay, would physically wave off the coins and pick out the right ones herself, same as Aling Nita, like the whole neighborhood had quietly agreed to keep the old American from embarrassing herself. What got me about Perla was this. She stood on a bad hip, too. I could see it, the way she braced against the table to get up off her stool, the little breath she took before she did it. One morning I asked her, one old woman to another, did she ever get it looked at? And she laughed at me. Looked at? She'd never once in 71 years been to a doctor for herself. Her children she'd carried to the health center. Her late husband she'd nursed through his heart trouble. But herself, no. There was always the stall, always somebody who needed the money that a morning off would cost. And something in me, the 40 years a nurse in me, that I thought that hospital... I marched her. Well, I didn't march anybody. We shuffled, the two of us, a matched set. But I got her to come with me to the little clinic I'd found, and I sat in that plastic chair beside her and translated my medical English into slow words and held her hand while a young doctor looked at that hip, and it was arthritis, same as mine. Nothing that a cheap little pill and a cane wouldn't ease. She cried a bit. I cried a bit. And on the walk back she took my arm. To steady herself, she said, but I think it was the other thing. And she said, "Ma'am Carol, all my life I am the one carry. Nobody carry me." And I understood her right down to the ground, because that had been my whole life too, and it had taken a fishwife in a wet market to say it out loud for both of us. That day did something to me, and I want to tell you the practical side of it too, because I found out something over here that I think a lot of you back home need to hear. See, I'm a nurse. Medicine is the one country I never needed a map in, and I want to tell you what it's like to be sick or scared you're sick in a place like Iloilo, because it turned out to be the exact opposite of everything that had ground me down for years at home. The first thing, the pharmacy. There's a drugstore on damn near every corner, and you walk right up to a counter, no appointment, no lines snaking around a rope, and half of what I'd needed a prescription and a fight with an insurance company for back in Ohio, I could just buy. My blood pressure medicine, the very same molecule, the same one that had me choosing some months between the pills and the good groceries, a full month of it. I stood at that counter the first time and made the girl ring it twice because I was sure I'd misheard. And they'll sell it to you by the single pill if that's all you can carry that week, cut right off the strip, which broke my heart a little when I understood why. Because for a lot of folks, a whole month at once is real money. But Lord, the sense of it. Then the checkup. I finally did the thing every nurse nags her patients to do and never does herself. I went in for a proper going over, blood work and all. The panel that back home is a morning of paperwork and a bill that shows up angry 3 weeks later. Here I walked into a little diagnostic place. They drew my blood before I'd finished sitting down, and by the next day I had the whole printout in my hand. Cholesterol, sugar, kidneys, the works. The bill for all of it, every test, came to about 1,100 pesos, $20 near enough. I read those results standing in the street with my glasses down my nose, reading them like the professional I am, and everything was better than it had been in years, and I knew exactly why. It wasn't the mangoes, though I'll get to those. It was that for the first time in a decade, nothing about being sick was designed to frighten me or ruin me. And the doctor, I found one, a real, unhurried, kind man who sat with me 45 minutes and never once looked at a computer. That visit cost me about $18. 18. He asked about my life, not just my symptoms. Where was my family? Was I eating? Was I lonely? Which no American doctor on a 15-minute clock has asked me since Reagan. When my blood pressure gave me that scare I mentioned, I was in to see him the same afternoon. No drama, no emergency room ransom, and he adjusted the one pill and had me. I have sat on the other side of that visit 10,000 times in my life, and I know the difference between medicine that's run for people and medicine that's run for money. And I know which one had been quietly wearing me down for years, and it wasn't this one. I'd catch myself some afternoons doing the thing I do, the old triage math. What would this have cost me at home? What would the fear alone have cost me? And every single time the answer was the same, and it meant I could stay. And I've got to tell you the numbers on the rest of it, plain, because I figure some of you have been doing that quiet arithmetic this whole time, wondering whether a person like you could really do this. My apartment, clean little one-bedroom, tile floors, hot water, and yes, air conditioning I eventually broke down and used, ran a little under $400 a month. My food, and I eat well, fresh fish off Perla's table, and rice and more mango than any human being ought to, maybe $250. Boy and the trikes and the little jeepney rides, the ones I finally figured out how to pay for, everywhere I needed, maybe $40 in a whole month. The medicines, the checkups, the good kind doctor, all of it together a fraction of 1 month's, and a woman comes twice a week and helps me with the cleaning and the wash, which I could never have paid for in my life back home. And that's another small dignity that costs me almost nothing here. All told, with all the little comforts, I was living well, with my head up, on right around $1,200 a month. Less than a single week at that very nice facility Denise had picked out. I ran those numbers over and over that first month. because they meant I could stay. But listen, I need you to hear the next part more than the numbers. The money got me in the door. I won't pretend it didn't. But if the only thing on the other side of that door had been cheap rent and cheap pills and warm weather, I'd have been just as thrown away as I was in that hospital bed, only somewhere prettier. What I found, I didn't have words for at first, and it came from the person I'd barely even noticed. Her name is Maricel. She was my landlady's daughter, maybe 28, worked the overnight shift at a call center, which meant she was usually coming home in the morning, right as I was hobbling out for my walk. First couple weeks, we just nodded at each other. I'd had a bad night with the hip, and I just stayed in bed, feeling every one of my 74 years and every mile between me and anything I knew. And around 9, there came a soft knock on my door. It was Maricel, still in her work clothes, worn out from the night, and she said, "Lola, I didn't see you this morning. Are you okay?" Lola. That word. Lola means grandmother. It's what you call your own grandmother, and it's also what young folks there call any older woman they've decided to love a little. She didn't ask could she call me that. She just did. And she'd noticed. This girl, dead tired at the end of her own long night, had noticed the old foreign lady on the second floor hadn't come out, and instead of going to sleep, she came and knocked. My own daughter had looked right at me and seen a problem to file and close. This girl, who owed me nothing, looked at an empty sidewalk and came to see about me. After that, she checked every morning, not in a fuss going past my door, and I'd holler back, "I'm alive, Maricel, go to sleep," and she'd laugh that tired laugh and go on. And then one Saturday she stood in my doorway and told me, not asked, told me, that tomorrow was Sunday and I was coming to lunch. Her whole family did lunch after church on Sundays, all of them, the grandmother and the cousins and the screaming babies, at her mother's place downstairs. And that was that. I almost didn't go. That old, cold pride, the thing in me that hates to be a burden, that would rather sit alone than risk being the extra chair nobody wanted. But she came and got me. And that table. There must have been 15 people crammed around it, spilling into the next room. A whole roast pig, lechon, they'd gotten it for somebody's birthday, and rice and noodles and things I couldn't name. And it was loud, so loud. Kids everywhere, 3 conversations going at once. And they made a place for me. They put me right in the middle. And Maricel's grandmother, who was older than me even, and spoke not one word of English, reached over and patted my hand and kept pushing food onto my plate and saying something I couldn't understand, but understood completely. The little ones started calling me Lola Carol, all of them, like it was the most natural thing on earth, like I'd always been sitting there. And I had to look down at my plate a minute, because I did not want 15 kind people watching an old American woman cry into her lechon. There it was. My own daughter had a house full of my whole history and a lifetime of my love, and she found a way to make me disappear. And a girl who'd known me 3 weeks pulled a chair into the middle of her family and said, "Sit here, Lola," and she never once made it a favor. That's the part. Nobody there ever made me feel like a charity case. They just made room. It was the same thing Boy did, waiting by that sidecar. Same as Aling Nita hauling out her stool before I could ask. Same as Perla waving off my coins. A lot of small things, over and over, until one day I noticed I wasn't alone anymore. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's all perfect, because I promised you the truth. It still gets hard. I still miss the cold. There are afternoons when the heat and the noise are too much, and I get short with people who don't deserve it. My hip still aches when the rains come. I had that scare with my blood pressure that reminded me I'm still an old woman a long way from anything familiar. And there's a grief I carry that's not going anywhere, one with my daughter's name on it. Denise and I have talked a handful of times since I left. Careful, cold little conversations. She sent a message on my birthday. Just a message, 3 words and a cake emoji. And I looked at it a long time, and I still don't know if it was an olive branch or just a reminder to herself that she'd done it. I don't know if we'll ever find our way back. I've made my peace with not knowing, mostly. Most days. Some days, not. But here's what I do know now that I didn't know lying in that hospital bed. There's a chair on Sundays with my name on it, in the middle of the table, and 4 little kids who think Lola Carroll has always been part of the family. And far as I'm concerned, that makes it so. It's not a big dramatic thing. Oh, and I've sort of adopted a cat now, or he's adopted me, the neighbor's orange thing that decided my windowsill is his. The neighbor kids call him something I can't say right. Ugliest cat you ever saw, one ear all chewed up. Sleeps all day, howls all night. Anyway, he's around. That's not really a point I'm making. He's just around. I spent 40 years being the one who takes care of everybody else, and I thought when I couldn't do that anymore, that was the thing that hospital bed had nearly convinced me of. And it just wasn't so. Turns out there was still a nurse in me the day I walked Perla to that clinic. And there's still a mother in me every Sunday at that table. And I didn't have to earn my chair by being useful to anybody. That was the lie I'd believed my whole life. Nobody here ever asked me to earn it. Aling Nita said a thing to me once that I go back to more than any wise words I ever heard from my own people. I'd been low that day, missing home, whatever home was. And she wasn't really even talking to me. She was fanning herself and watching the street. And she said, her English coming out sideways the way it did, "Ma'am Carroll, the person who throw you, that is his problem. No. You still here. You drink your Coke." Something like that. I don't know that she meant anything grand by it, but I've turned it over plenty since. So let me talk to you now, to the one of you I've really been talking to this whole time. Maybe there's a person who was supposed to love you who started treating you like a problem to manage. Maybe you're doing that quiet math I was doing, wondering if you're too old or too broke or just too late. I'm not going to tell you to sell everything. Maricel said a thing to me once, folding laundry. "Lola, somebody closed the book on you, okay? But the book, it is yours, not theirs." Crooked English, and it stuck. Took me way too long and a whole ocean to figure that much out. If any part of this sat with you, stay a while. I tell these quiet, true things here, and I'd be glad of the company. It's hot out today, and Maricel's hollering something up